Hey y'all, how we doing? We're back again for another episode of the Bare Necessities Podcast. I'm your host, Rob Napoli, and today is part 3 of a fun collaboration that we've been doing with Matt Hooper and the 2030 Leadership Newsletter. If you haven't listened to part 1 about open innovation, go do it. If you haven't listened to part 2 about how startups and corporates can and should work together from a very tactical place, go do it. They'll both be linked down below. But today's topic is something that is very big in the conversation of mainstream media, and it's something that needs to be discussed and is being discussed at global scale, and it's something that I know, Matt, you are very, very passionate about, and that is this idea that decarbonization and climate tech and combating climate change is the next arena for corporate startup collaborations and just the next arena for us as humans and corporations to figure out how to work towards solutions that we can continue to see our technological advancements and our communities flourish and thrive.
I thank you again for having me, Rob, for all the listeners out there of your show. Thanks for indulging me for 3 episodes, and for all of our readers and viewers on the 2030 Leadership Newsletter. I'm sorry that my face and voice have not changed since the last issue. I'm sure a more charismatic and interesting host can emerge, but they haven't yet, so you're stuck with me. In all seriousness, the way that I spent much of COVID was managing the same business that I'd begun in 2017. And so, in early 2020, when things started to shut down, I was on the precipice of launching an original podcast that I had done. It was actually a scripted musical that I'd worked on in adapting it started as a live show, Live from Tomorrow was what it was called. And it started as a live show and then became a podcast. And then I ended up doing a second season of it. And while that was happening, I was maintaining a ton of client work. And the public-facing client work that came out of that was the 3rd and 4th season, I believe, of the IBM Blockchain Pulse podcast, which I had done for a couple of seasons. And then the show that I mentioned in the last part of our conversation, which was called Forwards and Backwards: An Oral History of Quantum Computing, which I made also with IBM, with the folks at IBM Quantum. So I say all that to say that's a lot of content. None of it has to do with decarbonization. So why did I move into this field? I'm also trying to sort of paint a picture for founders and corporate innovators out there that, like, sometimes the decisions you make feel involuntary and they end up being the right ones. In the midst of doing this work, I started to look around and realized that I was spending a lot of the time alone, editing and interviewing folks and making content that I was proud of, but that ultimately wasn't necessarily going to be part of the impact I didn't know yet I wanted to make. And so I began to think about leadership. I began to think about where institutions and startups could work together. Right, that's something that's been near and dear to me for a long time. But they were thematic; they weren't practical. And so over the last 8 months now, in the course of building the IDENIA US practice and bringing the Dreams and Details methodology to US-based customers, clients, and ecosystem partners, you get a lot of feedback really quickly. I don't know how else to say it. People tell you what they think straight up. I have a reputation in the innovation ecosystem. People don't feel like they need to mince words with me, and the most excitement I saw was for this idea of connecting startups with corporates. How do we, specifically scale-ups, right? How do we help them? That was something, because again, I had the background for it, using the methodology to do that. And then there was a third piece that came from the thing that I had been wondering about the entire time I was Lonely and Editing podcasts, the thing that drives everybody in the planet Earth right now, which is, are we able to face up to and fight against the geological crisis that we're in, right? The sort of end of the Anthropocene era, this incredibly frightening, literally once in a lifetime, maybe once in a civilization's history size challenge, which is, will our planet continue to be livable? And who are those leaders that will help to ensure that we can continue to live on this planet, right? And I wanted to paint that picture to say, first of all, I'm a long talker. I bloviate, so I apologize for that. But secondly, I wanted to paint the picture to say that from the loneliness of working on individual content pieces and the thematic connections between leadership and open innovation, I saw an opportunity to build what we are now building, which is an accelerator program for scale ups hungry to work with large institutions to solve the climate crisis, specifically to focus on decarbonization technologies. And then the great wrapper on all of this, the tie, was it felt like an intuitive next step. That's what I mean. It sort of felt involuntary. Our chairman, Jim Snabe, and the co-author of the Dreams and Details book, right, the co-creator of the methodology, has a brilliant TED talk that I would recommend everybody watch that he gave at COP26 last fall 2021, called Dreams and Details for a Decarbonized World. And it's very literally about how, in many respects, the Dreams and Details methodology helped inform his decision as the chairman of Maersk to lead to the creation and deployment of uh, carbon neutral shipping vessels. And this process, essentially the creation of green fuel via hydrolysis, uh, was an example of premier, thrilling, and truly innovative leadership that came from not necessarily corporate startup collaborations, but a genuine open innovation uh, mindset, I'll say, right? The idea that great ideas can come from anywhere and innovation can come from anywhere. And then, of course, this leadership methodology. What's the ambitious dream and what are the crucial details necessary to realize it? And then what's the platform needed to sort of operationalize it, which includes the right mindset and the right framework. That's also part of the leadership methodology. That you could see that I sort of don't know how to process the. I'm very emotional about it. It sounds very silly, but the idea that I can play a role in helping institutions decarbonize via collaborations with investments in and serving as the customer for startups at the cutting edge of preserving our planet's future uh, is about as important a thing I could spend my time doing. And that feels, because it is, uh, like a great use of my time and like a great next step in a journey towards leveraging open innovation best practices, using the right leadership methodology to underpin those practices, and focusing on as big a problem as I can wrap my head around. And in this case, it's obviously humanity's future on planet Earth is the problem. So thank you for indulging that. But that was my really weird sort of piecemeal way to come to this new project and the emotions behind it.
Yeah. Well, I think, from that perspective, when we work on projects that we're deeply passionate about, something intuitively happens where we become, when done right, we can really innovate and create opportunity and really drive solutions that will scale. Because a lot of times when things get tough, we give up, right? And we know that this is a conversation that is very controversial in different parts of the country and different industries. But we know it's a problem that needs to be solved, and the fact that it's being talked about on a global.
Well, I think I want to go back to I think the controversial thing is interesting. So I think that I know what you mean because 4 or 5 years ago, people weren't talking about climate change. First of all, people kept saying global warming. It was and they weren't talking about climate change in. Um, it was politicized, is maybe what I'll try to say. It was politicized. It's still politicized. I mean, one of two American political parties doesn't have a climate change strategy. It's real and it's a problem. I think it's because the way that we have approached. We're also speaking just a week and a half after President Biden uh, signed the IRA into law, the Inflation Reduction Act, which is the largest climate investment the United States has ever made. So it's a huge opportunity for entrepreneurs, right? We're standing on the precipice of a big opportunity for businesses, as made possible by the government, which is really the dream scenario that policy enables passionate founders to go out and change the world. I mean, I think that's how, to me, a perfect system is that, right? It's that policy is the platform. The government offers a platform atop which you can build, and limited government can, or the idea that the government is somehow in the way, I think has resulted in actually a problematic environment for entrepreneurs. I mean, in the entire discussion we've been having about how corporate and startups can work together, I should say that with the brief exception of a few months in 2021, small business and startup formation has been down in the United States consecutively every year since 1977. Most Americans work for large firms. So we don't live in a pro business era. Ironically, we live in a monopolistic era in the United States in many ways, but it's not necessarily pro business. And so I think, because you're from parts of the rural Midwest, and I think that there's a certain, based on my role and based on my experiences, people who know me know my politics, but I'm not going to speak to overt political or partisan issues in this conversation. But what I will say is those are parts of the country that in the last few years have been considered historically overlooked or maybe underestimated, or from where large industries have divested. I'm not going to weigh in on whether or not the divestment part is true, but I'm not going to weigh in on the other parts of it because I think those are ideological and sort of complicated. And I'm from New York, so I can't, I am my own stereotype in many ways. I'm sure from people watching and listening from other parts of the country. What I can say is that the problem, as I see it, with the conversation around decarbonization for folks who feel that a move to green and clean tech might be threatening to jobs and ways of life, is that innovators, regardless of party, have to be able to say, I'm giving you something. I can tell you empirically that the climate tech revolution requires mass employment. Mass. We need as many people as possible working in this as has ever been mobilized in the history of the world. And there are more people living in the world right now than ever before in the history of the world. So it's a great time to get a job. And it's a great place to get a job. And it's a very meaningful life. The other thing I would say is that decarbonization, like the internet, is going to just be how companies are. We said in the previous installment of this long running conversation here that we don't describe things as an internet company, right? You just know how you describe something. They're on the internet. So you're going to be decarbonized. You're not going to be part of a fossil fuel based economy de facto going forward. And the third thing I want to say is there's an idea. This might betray my politics a bit, but there is an idea going around in certain circles that I'm very appreciative of. Derek Thompson, I think, has written about it. Ezra Klein has certainly written about it in the New York Times. Derek Thompson in the Atlantic, and the idea is around supply side progressivism. And if you can argue that sort of supply side economics made popular by Reagan here in the U.S. and Margaret Thatcher in the U.K., and then practiced by many different sort of neoliberal policymakers over the last 40 years, they had I don't want to say the stronghold on, but they certainly claimed supply side in their interest, in a sort of more right-wing interest. And I think the real problem, as I see it, with folks who go out to, as you were saying earlier off camera, like farmers in Iowa, or folks who have made money in the fossil fuel industry in West Texas. The problem historically has been that people tell you to stop, right? That new leaders sound hectoring and discriminatory against fossil fuel practices. So it becomes, hey, stop eating meat, instead of, I'll give you alternative meat or plant-based solutions. It becomes, hey, stop driving a Hummer, instead of, hey, the cost of electric vehicles are coming down, or have you considered riding a bike? There are policy issues that prevent this from happening, right? Like I'm the only American right now working at IDENIA in Denmark. When I'm hoping you bike everywhere. Like they have a strong role for government in their society. We live in a car culture. That's a problem. We live in a country where even the American myth is hit the road, get on the highway, drive to your freedom. Manifest Destiny, with its incredibly dark and frightening, paternalistic, racist, sort of anti-indigenous, I would say, like the core ideology underpinning Manifest Destiny, which consisted of those things, has resulted in a desire for freedom and travel and westward expansion anyway. Like, even for those of us who know the dark legacy of it, it's going to be hard for you, Rob, to tell me not to drive my car. I will get mad at you if you tell me to do that. So I think the opportunity for supply side progressivism to take hold is also the opportunity for climate tech innovation, which is to give you things, to give incentives to go green, even though that phrase is a bit antiquated, to give incentives to build for a new economy, and to stop saying no, but rather to invite you into a new opportunity. And I say all that because you said it was controversial. In most business conversations I'm in right now, it's not controversial. It's good business. But from a consumer standpoint and from a political standpoint and from folks who are getting lots of different kinds of news from lots of different places, I get that. Not everyone lives in a boardroom. So I'm going into rooms where people live in an information economy and see the value of decarbonization. They see it for what it is, which is the biggest opportunity of all time. But I wanted to address what you said because I would not be doing my job, nor would you be doing yours, if not everybody saw it as the biggest opportunity of all time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that's I think that's the thing is that I use the word controversial in the fact that it's highly talked about and politicized right now. And I'm the same way. Like a lot of the organizations I work with a lot of government agencies and government
Yeah,
accelerators. And these are things that they're all trying to tackle. These are big conversations and it makes good business sense. I mean, Amazon, one of the biggest companies in the world, committed back during global warming conversations to electrolyze their fleet by a certain date and put things in fact. I mean, there's companies that just by nature have been thinking about this for a long time and see how it is good for business. And those are the same companies that through all of this and even during the pandemic never stopped hiring.
right.
Because when we think about the opportunity we have, it's not taking away anything. It's actually adding new opportunity, new technological advancement, new jobs, new industries, new opportunities. And with this whole new working from anywhere and remote work,
Right.
like you don't have to be in the Valley or in New York to be working on these things, right? You can be anywhere in the world tackling these challenges and having opportunity.
Yeah, and it's also better for your carbon footprint. And it's ironically, it's also better for your carbon footprint. Not ironically, but humorously, it's better for your carbon footprint to not be going anywhere to do this, to stay, to contribute to your community, to make sure that the community you're living and working in is more sustainable. Like the local movement is still going to make a big difference here. You don't have to necessarily go to, yeah, an overpopulated city. I will leave you with this thought about this. I think is really important because we are in the early stages of developing this accelerator, and it's all I'm thinking about is the curriculum for this and how to get different, size institutions working together and so on. And I hope that I've been coherent for some of this. And that's the self conscious voice trying to sort of add some levity here. But it is a serious topic. I'm not sure how else to approach it. Like we're facing an existential challenge. A friend of mine, an investor, likes to say that climate isn't a sector; it's the whole economy. And I really do think that's an important thing for folks to understand. I will say the big difference between, say, 2018 and now has been that everybody understands the magnitude of the problem, but the real leaders in open innovation and elsewhere. I mean, open innovation is our bailiwick, but there's other folks doing other great work in policy and so on. I mean, what the U.S. government has done recently is tremendous and a huge opportunity. Uh, they're responding to the size of the problem in a way that I didn't necessarily think I'd see. That's maybe what I get excited about. Like I often joke that like Al Gore's Inconvenient Truth documentary came out at the very end of my senior year of high school. And everybody around me was like, "Oh my god, this is the next essential problem. This is the biggest problem of our lifetimes." And we watched the videos of polar bears on ice floes, and everything was melting around. I mean, you remember what the marketing was like back then? And as recently as a couple of years ago, the president of the United States was calling it a Chinese hoax. I mean, it was like, such a disgusting response to a massive problem and a real lack of leadership. And that's different. And something has changed. Like I felt that the time between my high school graduation and 2018, I don't know what changed beyond general awareness and, of course, the Paris Accords. That was significant. But then, the United States pulled out of that. temporarily. The last 4 years, I've seen more energy from, yes, activists and policymakers, sure, but that's not my world. Where I've seen is, I mean, not exclusively and not as much, but I've seen more excitement in the world of innovation than ever before. And that's, I know where the change comes from in the long term. It comes from invention. And there has not yet been as much invention because the costs were prohibitive or because, as I said, the incentives weren't there. And that's different now. We've been saying for years the cost of solar and wind is coming down. The cost of EVs are going to come down. It's happening. Teslas are cool. Whatever the individual branding opportunity was, it's been happening. And now it's all happened at once. And we talked earlier about the generational challenge. I think if the millennial era was such that we created a pathway and a platform for institutions to work with startups to enable this change, then our continued work and the work of the ascendant Gen Z generation and all generations to follow will be using that framework to ensure that we make it, to ensure that we survive the greatest challenge we have faced as a species.
What I was saying is when you think about humanity and all the innovation and invention humanity has done over time, right? We've seen tremendous growth and opportunity, but every time we grow fast and grow hard, it presents new challenges. And we're at that cycle again. And I think, I hear all the conversations about, electric vehicles, right? Our electrical grid is struggling to hold up with the heat and with all the cars. And not everyone in a residential neighborhood can have an electric vehicle right now because the electrical grid's not ready. That doesn't mean stop going. It means these are challenges that we're going to overcome. We've done that with the way our housing was. We've done that with the way our roads were built, the way our railroads, air travel, all these things. It's another opportunity for us as humans to create innovation.
It's the opportunity. And I think, it's funny because you're talking to I'm an internet entrepreneur by background, right? I mean, that's my whole life is internet enabled. Like for me, the idea that we're building from abundance and not scarcity is the central idea of the age. And so it's confusing to me. By the way, this is like a whole separate conversation about why NFTs are exciting, but sometimes confuse me. Is like you're inventing digital scarcity. And I get that has value, but that's just, financialized innovation is not necessarily what drives me. No criticism, it's just not what drives me. But so creating more scarcity, I get it. Things have been scarce forever. I have the most of this and you don't. I'm hoarding resources and you aren't. The gift of the information age was supposed to be look at all this data, look at all this knowledge, look at all these opportunities, right? And so we have to build from that. And I think that the green wave, the climate tech wave, the next wave of innovation, whatever we call it, is that. It's look at all the opportunities. If you need to reshape the entire economy, if you're going to decarbonize, if you're going to build new jobs while also recognizing that the last 100 years of industrial engineered and powered growth resulted in, a less livable and habitable planet, you got to be all in. Like, you can't look at that as something that's preventative. You have to look at that as an opportunity because there's no other way out. And we're in the early stages of telling that story, but by decade's end, it will be, it'll be the norm. I've never been more optimistic about actually saving the planet, but it's not because it's not because I'm a goofy, naive guy either. Like, it's because I see where the excitement and where the innovation is happening.
Yeah. I mean, it's exciting. I think nothing ever started with full adoption anyways, and conversations change all the time. Time will tell.
Right.
And the thing here that I get excited about is that there's tons of opportunity for new things to happen and new innovation, new ideation, and just new opportunity in general. And so I'm excited to see that. And I think we are lucky in our positions that we have to be in some of the conversations that not everyone gets to be in. We have that privilege. And that's why we wanted to use this platform to share a bit of that conversation. And it's something that's really passionate to you, and you're building something really cool that will be announced soon that, gets to be a part.
Yeah, and the water's warm. Like, we're inviting people in. That's the other thing. For me, it's like, come on in. Let's go innovate together. In a way that enables more opportunity for folks, and yes, makes makes the planet more livable in the process. But I don't, just to be clear, like for everybody out there, like you've heard my background if you've been hearing the other 2 episodes, right? Like I come from digital innovation and the corporate startup continuum. I'm not a climate scientist. I don't have that background. I don't understand climate policy as well as the next person. But what I see is an opportunity, and that's where I've moved. And also, I see a singular privilege, as you've said. Like if you know what I know and you have the networks that we have, and you're not in this fight, I think it's a missed opportunity. I'll put it that way, and I didn't want to miss it. So thanks, Rob.
Absolutely. And you bet. And I wanted to be able to share a little bit of that with, the communities that I serve so that they can learn a little bit more and do more research and have the opportunity to get in that opportunity. So, all right, Matt, I appreciate you. I know that we had a marathon morning. I thank you for all of that. For 2030 Leadership, thank you for tuning in. I hope that you check out the Bare Necessities. Bare Necessities listeners, go subscribe to 2030.
On LinkedIn. It's on LinkedIn. You can come find us.
Yes, I will make sure to link it in the show notes of all the episodes. Matt, until next time, I appreciate you. Everyone out there, stay well and rise up. Bare Nation, thanks for listening to the Bare Necessities of Entrepreneurship. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and leave us a review.